friends and gamers, welcome to the Fortress, and welcome to the strategic debriefing for France. Now, this is like a bonus little strategic conference episode as we discuss the fall of France. Now, France was interesting. You saw how it went down to 3 land units and a few of his aircraft left over. Well, only one less than he started off with. My prediction was he would have 2 land units and his aircraft left over. I mean, his aircraft were like an unknown factor. It really depended on my anti-aircraft. But 3 is within acceptable margins. Now, unfortunately, his attack was marred by a few mistakes where he missed some of my defensive die rolls as well as this river. So the river would have decreased his... he would have missed on one of his rolls on the first round, and then I would have gained an extra hit on him as well. So we tried to rectify that as best as we could at the end of his video, I believe. And so in the end, who knows how that would have panned out. As it was, he had a decent force surviving. Now, I think it would have been a lot closer if those flaws had been different, right? Non-existent, let's say. Another thing that came up was he initially, when he asked me over the phone about if I would scramble, I told him, like, name the conditions on which you would, name what units you are going into the territory, and I'll tell you if they scramble. And so he said he's going to bring his entire tank force into here, and if I would scramble to that position. I said no, I would not scramble to Picardy if his entire tank force came there. In the end, he ended up sending just an airborne unit here. In that case, I would have scrambled to that position, because if I had won that battle, then my aircraft would still land in Paris. And if I hadn't won that battle, I just lose an aircraft and it's not that big of a deal. But likely I would have won that battle, and that would mean that his 2 light armor from this position would not be able to hit Paris. They came from here, so on the first impulse they came to Belgium, and on the second impulse they came to Paris. Those light armor would have been stuck in Picardy and wouldn't have gotten further than that. So at that point, yes, I might have taken off, that means I'd take off 2 additional units off of him, plus any other attacks that I would have been spared any of the attacks that were landed by the light armor. And so that means he would have been way closer battle. He would have been down to 1 land unit left over. Of course, he could have recalibrated things. Instead of sending aircraft into Belgium, he would have sent them to protect his air transport in Picardy. So that would have worked out to be roughly the same. But even so, maybe it's something I would have tried out. It's hard to say. It really depends on what he would have come up with. Okay, so there's that one. And now let's talk about the other aspect of it. The fortified lines. Now, there was it a controversial decision or not? Well, it seemed to be. There's plenty of debate about it. The Maginot Line and the fortified line Felix. Now, the reason I built this fortified line was if he had launched his attack from, well, as he did from Belgium, he would have come into here and blitzed into this territory. It would have prevented a blitz. Of course, he had this in his control, so it wouldn't have prevented a blitz, but if he hadn't, it would have prevented a blitz into this territory. I had thought that you could actually prevent a blitz, we could have prevented a blitz even if he launched his attack from here. He comes into Picardy, he attacks into Alsace-Lorraine and wanted to blitz into southern France. For some reason, I thought that I could prevent that further blitz into here by the fact that there's a fortified line here. Similar to mountains. With mountains, an attacker into there prevents a blitz going out of it, right? It says in the rules, mountains prevent a blitz into and out of that territory. I thought the same thing would have been a fortified line. Unfortunately, it's not. It works a bit differently. Now, was it still a decent choice, a good choice? That's tough to say. Militia is easily chewed up. It's cannon fodder. And so for me, having that militia out, having that fortified line out there, backing up my 9 militia, was worth it, I think. It boosted them up to decent values, and I got more, well, of course, they weren't useful in that round, but even if the Germans had attacked across the Maginot, my militia, well, my units there wouldn't have survived 2 rounds. They would have died on the second round anyways. So for them to take a good few hits off the Germans if they had come this way, I think that would be worth it. Plus, we're not forgetting the fact that they themselves get a 2 dice at 5. That's decent, right? 2 infantry costs you $6, and they're rolling at 4s. You throw in another infantry in there, and you're $9, and you get 3 at 4. You have a combat value of 12. This gets you 10, plus you're boosting up all those guys, which adds up quite a bit. So I think in the end it was a good decision. Retrospectively, though, would I have done it? Tough to say. I thought I had sufficient income to spare when I set that thing up. Initially, I thought Germany would annex Bohemia and also Japan would go to war against China. Now, the fact that they didn't decrease this French income by 20%, I was at 8 when I could have been at 10. If I had been making $10 a turn, I would have had, let's see, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 militia to absorb hits, either here or here. And with the current German build, he would have failed his attack. I'm convinced of that. If I could have absorbed another 5 hits, I would have already been able to survive that battle without an issue, regardless of which direction he would have gone. So the tactic that he had of denying me that income was decent and quite well executed. It really had a greater impact on France than it would have had if they would have picked up that value. So that's something worth thinking about. Now, that is part of it. I still, another thing that I might have changed up was lend-leasing to Ethiopia. Now, that was actually not in my original plan. It was spur of the moment, thinking after I'd seen that that Germany had invested heavily in factories and U-boats at the start of the game, as well as, I believe it was a tactical bomber to Spain. So I thought, looks like he's going to go heavily in other directions as apart from Germany. And so I thought I had a little bit of income to spare in Ethiopia. Retrospectively, I missed that infantry because, as it was, even though his video didn't show it, due to the fact that one of his rolls was -1 by going across this river, unfortunately he forgot about it, and then he also missed one of the defensive die rolls. So at the end of the game, my units here, one of them at least, survived until the 3rd round. Or was it the 4th round? I think it survived into the 3rd round. And so that means that with an extra 1 unit there, I would have had 2 units in there, both throwing hits around at things. And then if I had thrown if I had a little bit more income, it would have been plenty sufficient to hold back the German attack. So Germany was very lucky, the fact that they decided to not invade Bohemia, and Japan was trying out to going after the Money Islands instead of China. Very lucky in that regards, as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, this would have been a very short game. But that's the way it goes. So I've discussed the fortified lines. I've discussed how close a battle this was. Now, the river penalty would be -1 on the first round of combat. I would also get target selection at 1 for the city. So I think he would have lost. I don't remember the die rolls, but I think there was one or two ones in there. So he would have lost. I believe I can select. Maybe it's just I have to select a vehicle class, or the attacker has to select something out of the vehicle class, or maybe it's the defender can choose something. It's not specific. If the defender has a choice of which one they want to hit, or they can just say, okay, this attack has to go to vehicle class. The rules don't specify. It doesn't specify if it's defender's choice or if it just means the defender's hit have to go to vehicle class. It's not clear in that regards as far as I'm concerned. So I've discussed the defense of Paris itself, the defense of the Maginot, the fortified lines themselves. In the end, I think it was as successful as a French capitulation can be. It was, as far as I'm concerned, it was good enough. And on some level, I had this discussion with Panzer King where if France doesn't fall, it almost feels like it could be a Comintern victory. And that's just the drift that we got. And so in some sense, it's almost better for France to fall so that Axis can grow strong and go after Russia and take them down a little bit. My analogy I used, it's like a attack dog, like you gotta, as the allies, you gotta let the leash out a little bit, lose a little bit of territory, give them a taste for blood, and then they run after the Comintern, and at that point, after you've seen that they've reduced the Comintern a little bit, then you step in and with the second front and just try to score victory points. That would be the analogy I used. Could be right, could be wrong, but that seemed to make sense to me. Now, the Germans' attack against all the U-boat or the convoy system was quite successful, although I feel like he did quite successful. It was expected, right? I didn't set very little things I set on convoy escort in anticipation of losing everything anyways, and I thought I'd rather keep myself condensed and reactive instead of worrying in the defense. Now this thing he did around England, in my opinion, is not a brilliant move. I'm a type of player that prefers having a force in being ready and constantly threatening England rather than wasting them along its shores. So we'll see if I can take advantage of that. The risk there, of course, is the reaction from his aircraft. With his medium bomber, his 2 fighters, and his tactical bomber, plus his submarines in position to take advantage of it, if I move my fleet here or anywhere, then I could risk being defeated in detail by his aircraft. Of course, that wouldn't be a bad thing because I could reduce his aircraft, right? That's always worth it. But if it's the right choice, I'm not too sure. Now, luckily, I could still move this aircraft carrier to Sea Zone 25 and pick up an extra fighter here in Poland. It could land in either Sea Zone 25 or Sea Zone 11 up there off the coast of Norfolk, and I'll be 1 fighter ahead, so that's not too bad. The convoy attacks were quite decimating to me, and that's unfortunate, but it was expected too. It's not like it was too big of a deal. Unfortunately, I couldn't utilize my British reinforcement of France. If France had survived, I could have dropped off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 aircraft in Paris, as well as 1 airborne anywhere in France, and what else? And plus 8 land units in southern France, if I wanted to. So with 8 land units in southern France and all that going into there, there's no way that Germany would have been able to take out France. But that's the way it goes, and in some sense I'm happy that it shook out the way it is. It makes for a more historical game, and it showcases what this game can be rather than stopping it short at the gates of Paris. I think that's fair enough. This fleet here seemed to successfully intimidate the Italians from going to war, which is a score in my books as far as I'm concerned. Now, one thing I feel like Germany made a mistake on is not getting these ships, these German ships that came from the French fleet, the battleship and the destroyer, not sailing them under the French flag back into the Baltic waters. He would have had a formidable fleet at that point. He would have had what would be 2 destroyers, 2 torpedo boat cruisers, battleship, coastal defense ship, a light cruiser, and a submarine. That's a decent force that would, I think it actually would outmass my force here under Somerville, and it would be pretty sufficient to do a lot of threatening damage against me. So instead he left them here, which means that my battleships here, my fleet over here, can go sink them if they want to. Now the risk there is that the Italians will go to war and take out what remains of my fleet, so it could be a bait. But I think we have enough loosey-goosey stuff here that we can probably take out what we want to take out. Yeah, that's my thinking. Alternatively, well, yeah, so that's my thinking on that one. Now, let's talk about this issue here. So, initially I'd gone back and forth with this attack. You heard in my strategy videos of me debating it, and then later on I think I even mentioned in comments that I wouldn't do it. Now, why did I flip my mind and go for it? Well, it wasn't until after I'd done my British turn that I realized the Germans, I left one position open and the Germans could attack Syria. I should have left this submarine in this position here. That's what I should have done. Now, that would have worked quite well. I don't know why I thought it was a better position to have this British sub here. I thought perhaps I could prevent the Germans from landing in Crete. The reason being, we're playing with some special prestige achievements, and one of them being if the Axis forces hold all 4 of these territories, then they get a Bronze Star. We're trying that one out, and so I think I was overly focused on that one, whereas this one seems to be the more obvious choice in retrospect. So after seeing that, after realizing that's what he would do, that made me think, like, the odds of this succeeding was 6-2. That's the difference. So it's pretty extreme difference, 6-2, and likely that he would win, which means if he captures this, it's going to flip this one to becoming Axis. At that point, he's already getting $5 out of this deal of controlling these territories. This would give a +2 bonus to his wartime income. Now we're left with the problem of this one. Should I use that money to go against Iran? Now, there's several reasons as to why I did it. First reason is because I like to experiment. I like to do new things each and every game. I like to plan out strategies I like to do unique things, even if it seems a bit dumb in the end. The more videos you'll see of mine, the more random strategies you'll see where I do all kinds of random nonsense to throw my opponent off guard. It's also to keep the game creative and interesting to me. If I found a system that worked, I wouldn't stick to that same system game after game after game. I like to play things differently. 2, I've always avoided this strategy in the past. In version 2, there was no penalty to the Americans going to war. It used to be in version 2, the France could declare war on whoever it wanted to, and the Americans wouldn't be bothered by it. In version 3, the Americans reduced their income by 8. Peacetime income by 8. And that's every turn after that. So Germany may lose out on the French treasury and not get those $10, but America loses $8 per turn, turn after turn after turn. So I was an advocate when I worked as a developer for HBG. I was really pushing for them to fix that loophole, and they did fix it, which I was very thankful for. But I wanted to try out this strategy nonetheless and see if it had still some merit behind it. So reason number 3 is a more complex reason. Well, reason number 3 is this. The situation of how it went is, well, hold on. Yeah, experimentation, loophole, and the third one is this. If this attack had failed, I was not going to do this. The reason being, if this attack had failed, and I had declared war on Iran, Iraq would have flipped, which would have given the Germans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, $9. $9 of income per turn, which would have defeated the whole idea of taking money away from France anyways. As it was, with the Germans succeeding here and flipping this, the only difference that my attack into this territory is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. $5 difference. They would have still gotten this regardless of what I did, and they still got this regardless of what I did. So the difference is $5 per turn. The Germans lost $10, but they gained $5 here. Plus, in some sense, they're gaining $8 per turn for the Americans staying out of the war. Now, if that's a good move or not, I will get into that momentarily. So the reason I invaded here, or declared war against here, became more strategically advantageous and tipped the balance in my favor a bit more since this became Axis. I even told James over the phone, if this does not turn Axis, I am not going to do this one. And therefore, it pushed me into that direction. Now, reason number 4 rather. You see how successful the Comintern is. You see how successful they are over here. And though they're not looking too great in Russia, they are doing okay so far. I don't think Hilltop Pillbox realizes the danger that the Germans can bring with their massive income. They're making $44 a turn now, plus their treasury from last turn, and their wartime bonuses. They're looking at $55 of income that's going to go straight for Russia. Well, they might bypass and detour and take out Denmark, Norway, Yugoslavia, and the like, but for the most part, they're going after Russia. I don't think Hilltop Pillbox realizes that he's in danger. But, still, Hilltop Pillbox is getting victory points for Spain. And he's getting victory points for China, which means that the Allies are behind. Now, one of the big factors for the USSR's income is the fact that one of the big gains that they have anyways is they get up to 11 victory points for every territory they conquer that they did not start the game with, worth 1 IPP. I'll show you right here. It's called Worldwide Communism. So he's already got, he will have this one fairly easy. He gets this one with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This one here is a bit more difficult. He needs to get one worth 1 IPP that the USSR possessed at the end of the game that did not possess at the start of the game. Okay, and not scored as any other victory conditions. Now he has ice-free port because he holds on to a major point with a naval base off the coast of Spain, so he has this one. He doesn't have this one. He does have this one. So 1, 2, 3. Oops, sorry, 1, 2, 3. And now the worldwide communism is the threat. So reason number 4 is we want to prevent the Comintern from picking up 11 territories that they did not start the game with. The most ideal place, the most place it's going to be fought over is here. It's going to be in Europe. But the place that he could pick it up for free would be here, because there's so few units here. In one turn, he could walk into here, subsequently, and this already gets him 1 victory point. In another turn, he could pick up this territory, with some difficulty, pick up this territory, and march into this one. Basically, he could pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, this is worth nothing, 5, so I guess just 5. He could pick up 5 victory points. Oh, sorry, that's all bad. He could pick up 3 victory points here. 3 victory points is not huge, right? But at the same time, it's not inconsequential. Now, is this attack worth 3 victory points? In my opinion, yes. I think it is worth victory points to me. I don't want the Russians to be distracted by going into this area and fighting this battle out. I want them to be entirely focused on this. Now, can they get 11 victory points off of here? With difficulty. They already get a victory point for holding on to those territories. It says in this worldwide communism that it has to be something that you did not get as another part of another victory condition. So that means that it can't be Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Lubelski and East Poland. That means it cannot be, let me get you up here. It cannot be these territories because they're getting it as a buffer zone. It can't also be this one. So we could, that's in Finland, that one I was pointing to, Finland. So let's try to see if we could find 11 territories. 1, 2, those you can get fairly easily. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He has to go a decent distance into Europe. And now that is achievable, don't get me wrong. If he picks up the 2 ones in Finland, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2 in Finland, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He has to basically make a line right there. He has to get that distance, excluding Greece, excluding Bulgaria. He has to get that line right there to get his 11. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, excluding Greece. Everything else he has to get. Now, this is much harder territory to fight than it would be in Iran. He's going to have to face closer to German factories. He's going to have to face them in the plains of Europe and the mountains down here. Now, over here it's all mountains and very few units here, and very few ability to reinforce. So even though this is only worth 3 territories, it's worth more to me because I get a bonus for holding this one in Allied hands. It's worth more to me in that case, right, than it is to the Axis, the Comintern. So you may not think that's a very valid reason, but in my opinion, the communists are doing quite well. And if I can avoid them from looking in this direction, and not even coming in this direction, and considering all their action up in that front, then that's well worth it over here. Now, what would the Axis do in that case? Not too much. I mean, they could build a minor factory here, so we did have to eliminate this one as well. But now our entire focus will be zoned in over here. 5th reason, now I'm going to get another tile. Now, the 5th reason is probably also not a fantastic reason. Like, this reason here with the 3 victory points to Russia is important, but it's not crucial. It's not as valid of a reason, but it's still important to me. It's still 3 territories that he would get for free relative to in Europe where he actually has to fight for them. Now, the 5th reason is this. Memory escapes me. Okay, 5th reason is this. Theoretically, if need be, I can build 1 railway line, 2, 3, and now I'll be connected to Egypt. At that point, I can rail stuff from the Calcutta all the way to eastern Egypt, all the way down to South Africa if I wanted to. I have my empire interconnected every which way at that point. Of course, I can't rail too many units. I could rail 1 from the Africa factory up to eastern Egypt, and 1 from India to, I believe, Transjordan. So that's about 2 units. For me, spending money on 2 units to be able to ship and rapidly respond to any threat, for me, that's worth it. So that's another point. Again, there are different values of importance, those tokens there, right? Some of them are more, some of them are less. That covers my idea of why I went here. So experimentation, loophole, testing. One of these was victory points. One of these was it's more convenient now because Iraq was flipped. And the last one was to interconnect my railway network. So that's my thinking behind it. Oh, I suppose one last point. Point number 6. Now this one may or may not be valid, and you can disagree with me on all these points, but right now that seems to be what makes most sense to me for the amount of time I'm thinking about it. If the Italians do nothing next turn, which I can probably make them do by just keeping my force here, then this force is just sitting here idle. My infantry is sitting here idle. I don't intend to invade France right now. Not until they're at war with the communists. There's no point in me invading France right now. I have all these units idle and no enemy to throw them against. Of course I could make landings in Normandy and Aquitaine, Picardy, but that will easily be pushed off. Won't take much for them to push it off. Now, there'll be things that my fleets are going to be doing, like reducing the German submarines, but my land forces are going to be fairly idle. My airplanes, the ones that aren't having good landing zones to fight off the subs, they're going to be fairly idle too. My strategic bomber, medium bomber, that kind of thing, a few of my fighters. So if I can skillfully manipulate myself where I can do two things, where I can shift my forces around to counter the U-boat threat, and my fleet around to counter the Italian threat, as well as take out the U-boats, and in the meantime use my land forces in a delicate way to take out all these units here, I think we can turn this around fairly quickly. Now let me quickly demonstrate. One transport here can drop off in southern Iran. I have air transport that can drop off units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It can get all the way there. I can drop off with my air transport 1 airborne unit in any one of these 3 territories. I can use my battleships to shore bombard as I drop off a couple units here. My medium bomber can also reach all 3 of these territories and land in here. I can rail from Calcutta up to this position, so I can have 2 units there, plus 1 or 2 units dropped off anywhere I want to over there. That is an option. And what else? Yeah, well, I think that's plenty. My strategic bomber could also strike across here. My airborne can strike across there as well. Basically, I have a rapid response team of aircraft as well as some land forces that can march through this territory and rapidly take it back. In one turn, I expect I can take 2 of these territories and possibly 3, depending on how well my amphibious assault goes. And I'll have aircraft to back up each one of those attacks. So in one fell swoop, I can pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bucks next turn. Now, if that pays off or not, it's tough to say, but let's hope, right? The Germans had a lot of luck, especially with the rolls against the Vichy, and so I think it's nice if we get 1 score on our team, right? The dice are fickle things, but eventually we may turn the dice's nature to suit our purposes. Now, that is our intent, and that is our goal, and this has been a little bit of a strategic analysis for the debrief of the French collapse. Now, we're at one last item of note. The fact that these 2 French submarines survived is very pleasing to me. If the Japanese go to war against the Commonwealth, then I believe I can go to war against France as well. I don't think it would hurt anything. It's not like the Japanese are going to declare war against France. But if that is the case, all these submarines are going to be a murder towards the Japanese. Oh, that is actually one final point that I was going to touch on. And now let me quickly think about it. Okay, this is the point I was going to make. One last point, and this is a half point, so it doesn't quite count. Let's put a militia there instead. So 1/2 point is the way Japan has oriented itself now is that it's not going after China. It hasn't built enough land forces to go after China, and it's let China become too strong to challenge. China, the fact that it has so much militia at this point, that all their attacks are just going to be perfect cannon fodder to absorb all the attacks of the Japanese and just be a supreme nuisance to them, then that for me says that Japan is not going to outright go against China. Will Japan go against the USSR? Possibly, especially combined with the Russian attack by the Germans into Russia. But I think it's most likely that Japan's going to go to war against America. If it goes to war against the Commonwealth, it needs to build up land forces. So far, it's been building up a lot of naval forces, which means to me it's going to sneak across the Pacific and strike at that fleet before they can even move. That makes sense to me, and I am fully prepared to deal with that. And additionally, I could also make some defensive moves against it. So I could also bring 3 aircraft to this position here from which they can scramble. Yep, I could bring 3 aircraft there from which they can scramble. And that means that this fight will be a little bit tougher for them. Now, how does that impact our scoring? Well, the fact that American income went down by 8 is not going to matter too much if the Japanese do attack early. Now, you might say, well, those $8 a turn is going to be handy for the Americans to have. The fact of the matter is, America builds up so rapidly regardless of what people do, that if Japan orients itself and attacks within 3 turns, I honestly don't think that's too big of a deal. And I have a few tactics as USA that's going to be quite the nuisance to the Axis players. So I believe that Japan's going to go after USA, and so therefore its loss of 8 IPPs worth of income is not going to bother it too much in the short term, because America can rebuild so quickly from any attacks that I almost want the Japanese to go after them, because they can just rebuild on a dime. Now, if Japan goes to war against the Commonwealth, then that brings America practically the doorstep of war anyways. Practically, not quite there, but close enough. And with the Lend-Lease capability America has, I don't think it's going to come to that. I think I have some strategies that might work out. Anyways, this video has gone long enough for a debrief. I think I've answered some of the questions. My intentions are, as you see, Morocco went and joined the Free France. Panzer King did a reroll on that one, and he rolled for Tunisia and Morocco. Tunisia stayed. He didn't reroll for Algeria. We counted that first roll for Algeria, the second roll for Tunisia, and last one for Morocco. So that's nice for them. France will be fun now. In some ways, I like playing small nations because you can really hyper-analyze their strategy and come up with, they don't have that many options, so you can come up with like one ideal plan, and you don't have to fuss around too much with some grand scope of things. Thank you all for watching, and keep it abreast with the situation, and I think the next turn that is probably going to be posted up will be either mine as the Commonwealth or Japan, depending on how quickly I get this edited. Thanks all. Bye.